Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk. Hello.
Hello. Greetings.
I wondered this time I was going to start it.
Yes, so I
didn't startle her with a hi.
I was a little more combobulated.
Like, why are you saying hi to me? Right? I've been here for 2 hours.
I've been here for days. Yes.
We were talking about a skunk attack.
It was not fun. Fuck. It was not fun.
So much chaos.
And for days, we would think we got it out of the house because you do get a little bit nose blind.
Uh-huh.
But we would open the door to come in the house and it would just like slap you again. Oh. And it was like, why? I think we are on top of it now. And another thing you can do is put bowls of vinegar in your house.
Oh, and it's supposed to like...
It helped. I'd rather smell vinegar than smell skunk.
Well, so I told you, my grandparents' dogs chased a skunk in through their pet door, and it blasted them from their entertainment center, so it actually blasted inside the house. And the reason, and I actually still have a newspaper clipping somewhere, though, because they wrote to their paper about that, and they wrote to their paper about a bunch of things, because my grandpa was a dental surgeon. Mm. And if you are a dental surgeon, you are not a dentist. No. That is offensive. You are a surgeon. And he had a thing about that. My grandpa was great. He was the goofiest guy. Honestly, he was probably a battered spouse. But I'm pretty sure. But he did a lot of good things. And he was in the paper for that a lot, actually. Oh, and he also did dental work for people in the Oregon State Penitentiary, but he also did special needs people who couldn't afford it, stuff like that. But he was very adamant. Do not call me a dentist. I am a dental surgeon. And in fact, they were in like medical communities. Mm-hmm. Like his friends were doctors. I have very close friends of theirs. They were Indian. Mm-hmm. And I still have goodies. They brought us back from India when they would go out there, neat jewelry and all sorts of stuff. But like they were the one I was promised to their son at one point. My parents were kidding. But they were not, as it turns out. So my grandma was in the hospital. We ran into the wife, and the husband was the doctor, and she was like, "I've been told you're married." And I was like, "Yeah." And I didn't even know the story until this happened. Mom had to like tell me after, like, that's on us. We promised your hand in marriage, and they actually do that. But she was like, you could have been married to a doctor. You were promised to a doctor. He became a doctor. I'm sure they all became doctors. It was one of those things where they had to, no matter whether they wanted to or not. But anyway, they wrote to the paper about that, and a deer that came running through with Christmas lights stuck in its antlers, I think, and stuff like that. Because they lived up in Sisters, Oregon.
That's the thing, fortunately, I think, that's gone out of favor as a trope is you want your daughter to marry a doctor or a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? I don't have that much stake in who my child... My identity is not defined by who my child marries, if, in fact, they marry.
But there's whole subcultures here in America that still stick to that.
I know.
Different people from different country of origin, different religions have different things for that, et cetera, et cetera. We just been watching my Big Fat Greek Wedding. The original one, and they're like, movie. You have to marry a Greek boy and all this stuff, right? And it's a good movie, but I was thinking about it and I was like, we kind of forget, and I don't know what the term for it is because racism is about balance of power, but
xenophobia.
That's what I was thinking, and then I was like, is that the right word? But
it's not a fear.
It happens to other people, too. It's not just white people saying you can't marry then this person of whatever color or origin. But there are other cultures that are like, no, you can't marry a white guy. So it does exist in a lot of places.
Oh, yes.
It's easy to forget, though.
I can understand it from a cultural point of view.
It depends. Are the Greeks rare?
Well, but I can understand saying, I wish you would marry someone if you had a strong faith. I wish you would marry someone who is a Christian, or I wish you would marry someone who was Jewish, or I wish you would marry someone who was
Yeah, they
Albanian
make him convert
like we
to
are.
Judaism.
But I don't understand caring about their career. I mean, obviously, you don't want your child to marry a career criminal, or
I would just like my children
to be happy.
If they get married, to be married to somebody that they love and want to be married to.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know? And I'm watching My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and he is the patriarch, the father, period. Mm-hmm. But the mother manipulates him to get what she needs. And mm-hmm. I was talking to my husband because I was like, and you see this because I've known a lot of women who are in those types of religious, Christian in these cases, mm-hmm. marriages where he is in charge and all this. And I've known that, and I'm like, when you know them separately, they're very strong individuals. Mm-hmm. And then they're doing the same thing, though. They're manipulating. So they're like, yeah, you're the king. But they're manipulating to get what they want. And I was telling him, I was like, I would never want to be in a marriage where I had to manipulate you to get what I wanted, though. Like, yay, more power to them that they have figured out that way to have power in their relationship. But I hate, because that's deceptive. If you have to manipulate him instead of being like, no, here's what I think it should be. That's manipulative.
Many, many moons ago, when I was a pampered chef consultant, I was shocked the first time I heard it. When a woman said to me, because of course, when you end the show, you ask if anybody else would like to book a show. And the first time somebody said to me, I have to ask my husband's permission. That is totally separate from saying, you know what? I think I'd like to do this. Let me check with my husband. What's a good date?
Right.
That's totally...
Or even, hey, maybe maybe he's the one who does the finances versus like I'm the one who does the finances. And maybe she has to be like, okay, I need to check with him and be like, how are our finances right now? That's different. But I never had one have to call him and ask permission when I did Mary Kay, but he told me I could spend this much today. Mm-hmm. So I have to figure out, so what of these things could I get? And I was like, but... Yeah.
Because there's also a way to present that. Because you could, if that is your dynamic, that is your business.
Yeah.
Right. But you could always present it as, you know what, my budget, I really have only budgeted $50 to
But they're not going to present it that way because they don't see it as wrong that they're controlled that way. That's my thing about that. Why present it differently when this is just the way it is? And often they assume everybody else is in the same position. I saw that actively happen with a woman who was being abused, and it took forever for us to be like, no, what's happening to you isn't normal. It's like, no, this is how it's supposed to be, because her mother felt that was the way it was supposed to be. Her mother was pushing her to remain in an abusive relationship. And it's like, and that, I think that happens a lot too. Like the parents stuck in that time, like, her mom is still mad at her because she did eventually divorce him. It took years of being in a group of women who were like, honey, no.
It's not supposed to be like that.
You shouldn't be this scared. You shouldn't be.
No.
But her mother was mad. Her mother said, how dare you leave him? He was a perfectly good man because he supported your family.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've mentioned on here before, I was shocked. I went out to dinner with a group of women, and one of the women said we were at like TGI Fridays, and she wanted to order steak. And the waiter said to her, how do you want your steak cooked? And she looked at him, dead honest, said, I have no idea. My husband always orders it for me. Ugh. How can you not know how you like your own steak cooked?
And like, that's one of the ones you just want to be like, try it different than he usually orders for you and see if you like it.
Yeah. I'm like, wait, I am way too much of a control freak.
My own kids know how they like their steaks.
Yeah, but
or burgers. It's not like we go out and get steak, but
right. But I mean, to give somebody, just order for me. I'm like, oh hell no! I know what I want. How do you know what I want?
Yeah, that's how it's always weirded me out, the him ordering for her. And it's never like a consultation. It's never, I'll order, but what do you want? And then I'll order, like she's shy or something.
Yes. And I do have some friends, a couple who he often does, but it's after they've discussed it. It's a little old fashioned nicety that they like.
Okay. And that's fine. That's
that is absolutely fine. No. And oh God, no. But no, he'd be like, what are you going to have? And then he will.
Yeah, I will tell you, my husband is better at remembering the things I can't to say. Oh, if there's mayo on that, he's better at that than I am. Like he'll remember before I will, though, and so he will look. Is there mayo on that? Or whatever the problem is. Are there onions on that? That's the one I'm at. Mayo, yeah, I'm really good about that now because that hurts. That punishes. So, but like onions that I hate and will ruin the whole experience for me if there's raw onions on something, I will often forget to ask if there's onions and he will remember to order.
Aw, that's so sweet.
Like, wait, if there's onions on that, there shouldn't be onions on that. And I'm like, oh yeah! So.
Our thing is always, in an Asian restaurant, I'll turn to my husband and go, do I like the duck here? It's a family joke now. We'll be in any kind of restaurant now, and the girls will be like, do you like the duck here? Oh. Or, I think you like the duck here. And I'm like, shut up.
Don't mock me.
It was funny when it was just me and your dad saying it.
Oh.
Okay. I really wanted
we're going to start early.
We're going to start. Is it? Oh,
yeah.
We've only been, are you ready for me to start?
No, go ahead.
So this one I've entitled Sisters.
All right.
And I really wanted to, of course, I would have had to plan way in advance, and I'm not that technologically advanced. The song Sisters that Rosemary Clooney did in Holiday Inn or White Christmas or one of those Bing Crosby movies. They do the two songs Sisters. I love that song. But, or then I was like, no, you can't do that. So then I was like, I need a pithy quote about sisters. Couldn't fucking find one. Oh. All of them were really like the things that make you want to throw up in your mouth a little bit.
Not even from like Little Women.
I did not spend that much time. But everything I was pulling up was all that stupid stuff you would see in a greeting card.
Yeah.
The sister is the best friend you were born with.
I have found if I purposely go and try and find a quote about anything, they're all going to suck.
Yes.
And then like however much later I happen across them and go, damn it, this is what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will just say, no, probably, oftentimes, nobody knows you better than your sister. But I will also say nobody can push your buttons harder than your sister. So.
I do not have this experience because we were 14 years apart.
Yes.
But
I'm just going to.
I know it from watching other people.
Okay. I'm just going to give up on sweeping generalizations and get the fuck on with it. Okay. So, Reesa and Jodie Trexler were sisters growing up in Salisbury, North Carolina, which at the time had a population of about 30,000 people. So this was in the early mid-'80s. It's sort of west central. It's halfway between Winston-Salem and Charlotte. And after I wrote that, I wrote, and probably most of our listeners haven't at some point lived in North Carolina and don't care. But now I have given you the geographic reference. So, of course, if you're not familiar with North Carolina, I might as well have said, it's halfway between Narnia and Oz. People talk about Salisbury in the 1980s like it was Mayberry. Just needed Aunt B bringing a pie down the street to complete the picture. Nobody locked their doors, and everybody went to church. You know the drill. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah, I remember the satanic panic was going on during this time, and I remember the 80s quite well.
I know how they were side-eyeing their neighbors.
And I do not think it was this happy la-la, but I get it. We've
Come on, the 50s wasn't happy la-la yet.
Yeah, so we're going to just gloss on by. Now, here's an interesting couple of little fun facts. Salisbury, and it's so funny because the people there pronounce it like it's spelled Berry. Salisbury.
Oh.
Hard on the berry. This is where the Food Lion grocery store chain got its start, along with Rack Room Shoes and Cheerwine soft drink. So, which has been continuously in production since 1917. I think it is actually, they claim it's the oldest soft drink made in the U.S. I don't remember ever drinking it when I lived there, but that's neither here nor there. But because of Food Lion money coming into town, there were a lot of people who were making buku bucks, and there was a solid divide between the nice side of town and the poor side of town. The Trexlers lived on the poor side of town, but they didn't live in like a super bad part. It was a decent house. It had a big yard. The mom, Vicky, her parents lived right next door. They could see the house through their windows. And this was the kind of neighborhood where everybody knew everybody. And all the kids were hanging out together. You know, again, like Mayberry. So on June 15th, 1984, Jodie and Reesa had been out of school for 1 week. Jodie was 13, had just graduated from the 8th grade, so she would be starting high school in the fall. And Reesa, who was 15, had just finished her sophomore year, so she would be a junior in the fall. So the girls were very close. They had shared a bedroom their entire lives. They had drifted a little bit apart when Reesa entered high school. And again, this was another documentary that I watched for some of this. Everybody, including Jodie and people who knew them and their mother, are like, it was just typical girl stuff, teenage girl stuff. One was going to high school, and so she had different friends and wanted to hang out with her older friends. And so on this day, which was a Friday, Reesa had her friends Paul Rogers and Jim, didn't give Jim's last name, over in the afternoon. Jim was like a class clown, and there was speculation that he may have had a crush on Reesa. Paul was a transplant from California, so he was exotic. No. He was exotic. He was a skateboarder and had like a punk edge. And I saw pictures.
He probably wore a cross earring in his right ear, and just
I saw pictures of him.
Slater.
I saw pictures of him. He had there was nothing punk about him. Trust me. Great. Or else he swallowed it all down when he got to Salisbury. But he was a skateboarder. So the three had convened at Reesa at the Trexler house to watch MTV, which was still fairly new then.
Yes.
And they played music videos.
I know.
Still.
I loved watching MTV with my friends. It was a good time.
Neither of the boys got MTV at their house, and they all lived sort of in the neighborhood. So they were amped up. They were gonna watch MTV. And they do. I think Reesa told Jodie to bug off. It wasn't a fight. It was just like, I got my friends over, bug off. So at 3 p.m., Reesa announced that her soaps were coming on, and she was changing the channel. So it was most likely, I even looked this up, I don't know why. It was most likely either General Hospital or my personal favorite, Guiding Light. But neither of the boys had any desire to watch soap operas, and Paul had to get to his part-time job, so they left. Jodie, again, who was told to fuck off, was hanging out in her room. Well, I don't know that it was they were harsh words. It was just like, leave us alone, punk. At some point that afternoon, so Jodie goes out into the living room and realizes Reesa's not home anymore. She assumed that her sister was next door at her grandparents' house, and she walked over. I mean, it's the next house. Right. So she walks over and sees that their car isn't home. Their car isn't in the driveway. There's nobody home. So she figures, oh, well, they've gone out to run an errand and Reesa went with them. So she went home, hung out in her room, talked to some friends on the phone. Just before 5 p.m., Jodie sees her grandfather run screaming out of his house. And she can see this from her bedroom window. So she runs next door, afraid that something's happened to her grandmother. She goes into the house because at this point, nobody's called the police yet. She goes in the house and looks in off the living room. There's a spare bedroom. And she said there's just blood everywhere. And her sister is laying on the floor. And there's a blanket partially covering her. A bloody blanket partially covering her. Her sister is naked. I don't know if that registered with her at this point or not. Her memory, but she remembers her sister was not moving. And everybody, she and her mom were both interviewed in this documentary. They don't have clear memories of that day because of the trauma. Mm-hmm. But she does remember begging a police officer to tell her if her sister was alive or not, because she didn't even know that. So when mom comes home like right after that and sees her father outside, distraught and still screaming for help, she also assumes something had happened to her mother. So she runs in the house and just becomes hysterical. I do not blame her. She runs back to her house. She doesn't remember people arriving, but it's like all of a sudden her house is full of neighbors. Mm-hmm. It's like snippets. It's like snapshots of what she remembers from that night. And to this day, she still has flashbacks from that night. So Detective Rick Thibodeau was one of the officers who responded. He saw multiple stab wounds. It ended up being 18 stab wounds in total. And the blade of a knife broken off in her shoulder. She was actually stabbed so deeply at one point that it severed her spine. There were a lot of bruises. He saw what he believed were probable signs of rape. And they did later find semen on the body. But remember, this is 1984, so DNA evidence is not what it is now.
Right. It'd be like, at that point, excretor versus non-excretor, or maybe blood type. Probably blood type.
At 7 p.m., the body was removed and the police started asking questions. So Jim and Paul were both questioned repeatedly. In fact, Paul was at work and didn't know anything about what had happened until the police showed up to question him, which is a shocking way to find out about a friend's death. The police believed they needed to focus on someone close to Reesa. So the next person they interviewed was Walt Monroe, her grandfather. He was very cooperative. Everybody, all these people I'm talking about, were very cooperative. Yes, what can I do?
But I get why they're looking, because the partial covering up of her and stuff.
Yes. And that's just playing the odds. That's common sense. That's where you start. Yeah. And he was very torn up by the fact that they could suspect him in the first place. Okay, so being a smallish town, rumors start to fly because everybody is talking about this. This horrible thing happens right in the middle of the day, and everybody wants somebody to blame. Everybody wants to know who to blame. So one girl, interestingly enough, did not find her name, who called herself Reesa's best friend, along with her mother, generated a lot of the rumors and kept feeding the rumor factory.
Reesa's mother or the girl's mother?
The girl's mother.
Okay.
The girl and her mother kept the rumor factory going.
I know those people.
I thought of who was killed when you were in high school.
Oh, yeah. There were two, but yeah.
And everybody kept going on about how they were
best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Reesa's funeral was held on June 14th. Literally thousands of people attended, most of them not known by the family. I mean, this was, on the one hand, I totally get it. This is the town trying to support this family. But how overwhelming. I can't even imagine. Some people noticed that Jodie, again, I want to point out, she was 13 years old, didn't cry at the funeral. And some of them decided that must mean that she had killed her sister.
I hate that so much.
So, unfortunately, for some time, there was a part of the police force that bought into this idea. She had been next door all alone, so she didn't have an alibi. The police grilled her repeatedly. They demanded samples of her hair, her saliva, her pubic hair, and her fingernails. And while you could say, well, okay, this makes sense. They want to eliminate her. This is the spare bedroom in their grandparents' home, which was where Reesa and Jodie frequently spent the night. So her hair is going to be there.
But I hate when they're like, a woman couldn't have done this because a woman wouldn't be strong enough, and that's a general bullshit. But we're talking about a 13-year-old girl at this time, and a severed spine and a broken off blade. I feel that does take a certain amount of strength that most 13-year-old girls would not have.
I would agree with you. It would be different. There could be a situation, but they were close. I
get rage, but
yeah, they weren't sisters who hated each other. They were very close. So the police continued to question her, and they were always asking her leading questions and loaded questions. Mm-hmm. So in addition, they asked the mom, Vicky, a lot of questions about Jodie and about her relationship with her sister. And the mom will say this, because the family initially trusted the police, it reached a point where Vicky asked Jodie if she had done it.
Oh.
Yeah. The police indicated that either Jodie had killed her sister or she had helped someone do it. And Vicky became suicidal, thinking she's lost a daughter, and to think that one of your children killed the other one. Jodie was understandably devastated that her mother doubted her. And at one point, she ran away and said she would not return home until she could have a conversation with her mother that was not an interrogation. Mm. And
she was 13. Right?
She was 13. Yeah. So with no leads, the case went cold. Everything was chased down to a dead end. And I'm not saying that the police, their focus was misaligned, I believe, for a time. But they did run down every lead they had. And they were just not getting anywhere. So periodically, someone would want to reopen the case and reinvestigate. So what happens when the police reinvestigate a case? They start by re-questioning everyone.
Uh-huh.
Every time that happened and people started being questioned, the rumor mill started up again. And she got it every time. She had neighbors scream at her. She was spat on. She was called names. And it followed her to every job she had in that town. Because people, oh, you're that girl. Who doesn't want to hear that at work or anywhere? Another sad offshoot of this story, Jim, one of the guys who had been there watching TV with her, never fully recovered from what happened. He was in and out of rehab for drug and alcohol for several years and passed away at the age of 48.
Wow.
Yeah, because he had called Paul. He had stayed tight with Paul, and he never could get over. We were just with her.
Yeah.
We should have stayed with her. Something,
Survivor guilt.
Yes.
Basically.
In 2017, Jodie happened to catch an episode of, I'm very sorry to say this, Dr. Phil, where someone was taking a polygraph test to prove or disprove something. Don't know what that episode was about. But she was tired of being accused for years, so she contacted the show. To her surprise, they invited her to appear on the show, to come take a polygraph and then get the results on the show. Her mother did not want her to do it. Not because she didn't believe her, but just because she was afraid it could turn out bad. Mm-hmm. So when the show aired on April 9th of 2018, Dr. Phil told the world that Jodie was telling the truth about not killing her sister. So the publicity from the show generated new interest and new leads. The new cold case detective, Salisbury Police Sergeant Travis Schellenberger. Okay. So he's the new he specifically works cold cases. He was 6 years old when Reesa was killed. He reached out to Jodie and said, would you be willing to come and take another polygraph test with the police department? She did, and she passed. Also at this point, Reesa's friend Paul sees this on TV, and he reaches out to her via Facebook with a public apology. Which I'm like, holy fuck, when does that happen?
Wow.
They reconnected. He called her and she's like, and he just couldn't stop apologizing, forever doubting her, forever for not standing by her, for whatever. So, and the two of them decided to investigate together, and they're looking at everyone who knew her, everyone who knew Reesa, because everyone thinks it has to be someone who knew her. Mm-hmm. So now we're in 2018 and DNA testing has come a long way. So, Schellenberger reaches out to the FBI for assistance, and he gave full credit to the police at the time in what was the year? 84. I thought so. Because of the way they preserved the evidence. Mm-hmm. They preserved it remarkably well. And so he said, can we run this semen sample? They did. It doesn't match any of the FBI, any of the law enforcement databases.
Okay.
However, he goes on to genealogical DNA, yep, and it got a match, which was a third cousin. So they were eventually able to do the family tree thing and track it down. Curtis Edward Blair was a random man who worked at the nearby Frito-Lay factory. It was like 2 blocks away. He had no connection at all to Reesa or her family. He did have a string of arrests in New York and California for assaults and sexual assaults, and had been convicted of assault with a deadly weapon. There were some places early on that would not release his name because he would never be brought to trial because he died in 2004. So they said he cannot be tried and therefore proven guilty or innocent.
Gotcha.
But
DNA evidence.
Sir, you left.
Sir. Good sir.
Sir, your ejaculate is on the woman who is dead. I believe that means you were there.
Yeah.
So, and I do want to say one very positive note, even though they went through a really rough time, that Jodie and her mother have repaired their relationship.
That's good. It would be very hard to get over your mother suspecting you of murder.
Yes. At the same time, I can see needing to put the question out there. Yeah. And it's like, I will believe you no matter what you tell me, but I have to ask because the police are driving me fucking crazy. So, but yeah, I can't.
So the question is, did he commit other crimes that were not solved? The way he covered her up then, if it was a stranger crime, indicates that she may have been his first or perhaps just his youngest. Something that made him feel guilty about it, right?
On the other hand, at some point, Jodie had come next door. I wonder if he could have heard her on the porch and so pulled the blanket, because it was a bedroom, so pulled the blanket off the bed, like trying to hide her. I don't know. Also, I don't know if, because remember the grandfather is the one who discovered the body. Could he have moved the blanket?
Could have. And he could have, I could see a grandfather covering his granddaughter's naked body.
Yes.
So that is a possibility too.
Yeah. But it's...
Now I want Fritos.
Fritos are the one snack food I do not particularly care for.
I like them.
I do want to quickly say my sources were Cold Case Files documentary on A&E, Medium again, Wikipedia, I think Thing 2, Wikipedia, NBC News, and the Salisbury Post.
Okay.
But yeah, Fritos just never have been a favorite of mine. They're too...
I like them because they only have 3 ingredients: corn, oil, and salt. So, of all chips, they are, I don't want to say healthy.
They do make good scoops for things.
Like, we get bean dip.
Like Frito pie.
We get bean dip, but yes, like Frito pie.
Bean dip would also be...
All Gone Pizza has Frito pie right now. The one in Fort Garland. I have not had it because I really like their green chili, and so that's what I'm going to get when I go there, not the red chili.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, they have all kinds. They are selling like whole rotisserie chicken. They're pretty much, because all the other restaurants right there shut down.
I went?
Yeah.
Their food was good.
It's everything I've had is good.
Yeah, and what did we get? I can't remember what we got for dessert, but I remember it was good. It had chocolate in it. That's all I remember.
I've looked for what you got that one time. It's never been there when I've gone there because I had a taste of yours and it was good, but I've never had the whole thing.
It had a weird name. It was a such and such cake.
Like Buckhorners, but not. But it was something that I think of.
Like a Johnny Buck cake. And it was, you're like, what the...
Don't get me wrong. There's always something else because they have that whole window of like...
Yes.
And it's different every time. And it's just, you can tell it's not off of an assembly line. It's real.
It's not
pie and cake somebody's making.
Yes.
And they always have the hummingbird cake because it's very popular, but it's massive. So you get a massive slice. But I had like chocolate cream pie and stuff last time.
Their stuff is really good. And now I'm hungry.
Well, it's going to get worse. I have titled this Of Bees and Cheese.
I know. I'm like, Okay,
so here we go. I was in a mood because I had just researched 2 very horrendous things, including shit I did not put out on the thing because I would get upset saying it. So, I love a crime caper, but I found searching for heists to be somewhat dismal and disappointing.
Yes.
Like, it's always so much more basic than the movies, and I'm like, well... But I finally struck it rich, discovering there are 2 problematic series of heists that have flown under the radar despite being a bit surprising and ongoing. Sometime in the not-too-distant past, almond suddenly became the tree nut people creamed themselves over. It's so healthy, they exclaimed. Suddenly, their tiny almond nipples were being milked for all they were worth, and the vast majority of trail mixes became inedible to me due to the proliferation of almonds in them. Peanuts simply were not good enough anymore.
I was going to say, this isn't flavored at all by your allergy to almonds, is it?
Indeed.
I hated the proliferation of almond milk because it shoved my soy milk off the...
Oh, I'm an oat milk person now. Abuse the oat nipples. That's fine. Almond farms...
Ow. Why are we abusing nipples?
Almond farms spread across California like the blob sensing human meat, or long pig as it's called.
You were in a mood.
I was. It's okay. It goes away after a bit, I'm sure. A 2022 article put the footprint of almond orchards at about 1.3 million acres at that time and growing, with 2 hives of bees needed per acre at least to properly pollinate them.
Oh.
But crops need pollinators, and pollinators are threatened these days by things like pesticides, cold temperatures, mites, loss of habitat, predators like bears, because bears do actually like to break into hives, and diseases.
And picnic baskets.
Meaning there aren't enough to pollinate all the almond trees during pollinator season, which happens to be in winter, actually, namely early February. The found solution has been beekeepers all across the nation driving their hives to California to settle them around orchards where they're paid, of course, to kind of rent out their hives. I was going to
say rent a bee. I've heard of this, yes. Of this phenomena.
Yeah, it's not rare, but the almond orchards have become very insane. And so it's just like...
Yes. I had actually heard of it in context of a restaurant that had a rooftop garden, and they rented... They have a beekeeper who comes and he put up the hive. Yeah. I think they're going to keep it, but they don't service it.
It's become so that is another piece of their expected income for beekeepers now. A lot of time, it's not just the honey; they can still do that, but they're renting out and it really works in their benefit to be doing this pollination because they're still making that honey in the meantime, right? So,
and they're, what do I want to call them? I want to say they're bee sommeliers, but sommelier is not the right word.
Pimps.
Okay.
No, actually, they would be the sex workers, and the beekeepers would be the pimps.
Yes, they're bee wranglers.
Yes. So they leave them there until the pollination is completed, and then they drive them back home. It's insane. Like something like 400 at a time, driving with 400 hives. It must be like yeah. Thus, bee rental prices have skyrocketed, creating the perfect storm for bee theft. Related costs have increased, and beekeepers are sometimes having to supplement their hives with sugars to help them make honey. Because, for example, we've had some really rough weather, right? The climate is changing, and so crops will get wiped out. Then those bees have nothing to feed on, and that can kill them. And they're definitely not producing honey.
And if the summer is too wet, it's not good for bees.
Right, because they'll be like the mold. So they're and that'll kill them, I think. So the most problematic issue, though, is that hives are being stolen wholesale from actual beekeepers, often with the bees and hives being abandoned after the money, like they drop it off and then done. That's all they needed was to collect that money. And then this leads to the deaths of the bees, which compounds our pollinator shortage.
Yeah.
Beekeepers are struggling to keep their striped minions alive to begin with. Now they have to worry that thousands of dollars worth of winged workers may be whisked away in the middle of the night, leaving them in a financial hole. Plus, it's sad. It's bee murder. The people stealing the bees don't care that we're shedding pollinators, which is doubling down on the climate crisis, or that these are living creatures that they're carelessly tossing aside after collecting their dough, like dick bags. When I say that this results in thousands of dollars worth of damage, I'm talking tens of thousands. And a single Oregon beekeeper who drove to Oregon only to have drove down from Oregon, only to have 92 of her 400 hives stolen, estimated the cost of that loss at $44,000.
Wow.
That's also less honey she has to produce. Because the heist involves stealing as many hives as possible, forklifts are often employed sloppily. This results in often devastating amounts of damage to hives that they leave behind, as they're not long, so they take, I need another one now, so that's even more they're going to steal, but all these ones are broken and destroyed, and the bees are killed, and so each time the bees die in the thousands when they do these heists. These heists started happening in excessive numbers in California around 2016. They were happening before that. I saw stories from 2013. And the California PDs in almond areas have had to make departments titled hive crimes to investigate.
Oh my God.
It's that big a problem. To investigate and try to track them down. While hive heists do occur in other parts of the country, none of them are comparable to the level found in California. Some of the thieves are other beekeepers who can't deliver on their promised stock, while others are gangs of thugs. Neither group is safer for the bees than the other. The beekeepers still happily let those bees die off.
That's wrong.
It is wrong. They're actually to be worse than just the thieves that have nothing to do with bees and just see them as insects. In an attempt to keep this from happening, multiple entities are trying out various solutions. There are GPS trackers attached to some hives, surveillance cameras in the orchards and storage sites, and it's been recommended that they put their information on each hive so it can be identified if found. There are tracking apps for hives such as Bee Hero, which uses a GPS-enabled sensor on each hive. There's something called Smart Water CSI, which helps connect stolen property with its rightful owner, not just beehives. This exists for other things. It uses this so that it's a clear liquid. And it shows up under UV light, and it can still be seen even if it's painted over. It can still be seen through multiple layers of paint. Desperate beekeepers are patrolling their hives at night with guns during these seasons when they're being come for. Lawmakers in California have started qualifying bees as livestock, which carries greater fines and punishments than the theft of non-livestock items, and it's a felony.
Good.
The California State Beekeepers Association has offered cash rewards for information leading to the discovery of missing hives, as well as trying to educate beekeepers on ways to keep their bees safe. The Almond Board of California exists, has joined a coalition that's attempting to create habitats for pollinators on ranches and orchards that are already being run so that then there's somewhere for the bees to live. And again, this would help everybody involved, and it helps those bees thrive. In the meantime, the almond industry is trying to create hybrid almonds that self-fertilize, hopefully eliminating the need for shuffling bees around the country in the future. And yet nobody will be like, that's GMO! Even though that's literally GMO.
It is GMO.
Now we move on to something a little more palatable. In 2015 and 2016, there were a rash of cheese heists spanning the Western civilization, all within a matter of months. In October 2015, thieves broke into a storage warehouse in Reggio Emilia, Italy, where Parmigiano Reggiano cheese wheels are kept to age. The popular and high-value cheese must be aged at least 1 year to be authentic. Each wheel is worth a minimum of $500, and entire towns rely on the production of this cheese to keep them going. There were like 5 towns, and I forget what the term is, but there's like a legal term that this is the only place this cheese may be made now.
Yes.
It is authentic to their culture, and therefore it cannot be made elsewhere. The cheese is considered so valuable that banks take it as collateral on loans. One article said that a single bank in the region had $120 million worth of Parmigiano Reggiano in its vault as collateral at one point.
Wow.
And it's just aging more. Like, it's fine. It just keeps aging. This particular theft involved thieves thought to be part of organized crime in the area who lined up in Lorenzo Panetti's warehouse, creating an assembly line where wheel after wheel of cheese was passed like a fucking cartoon, finally being sent through a window, which he has now barred. Panetti lost about $100,000 worth of product that night. I mean, that's the thing about these thefts is that this is people's livelihoods. Beekeepers are being put out of business. Cheesemakers are being put out of business. But this wasn't the first heist of this kind. In fact, it had been happening for at least 2 years before they hit Panetti's warehouse. Believe it or not, there's an incredible need for this valuable cheese on the black market. That's right, the black market cheese.
The black market needs Parmigiano Reggiano
cheese. Yeah, because it's valuable.
Well,
it sells for more than a kidney. Yeah. Police in not anymore, I'm sure. Police in small town Italy have been increasing their patrols and security systems have been set up. Some cheese producers, like Panetti, have installed bars over their windows to deter thieves from getting in or out that way. But this isn't the only hit on the towns responsible for the production of Parmigiano Reggiano. People are now counterfeiting the cheese, putting out fake Parmesan. In a 2022 article, they stated that 2021 sales numbers for the authentic cheeses were at $2.7 billion per year, while the counterfeit cheese market had hit $2 billion.
Wow.
The Parmigiano Reggiano Cheese Consortium has taken matters into their own hands by implanting, there's always a consortium or a board, implanting tracking chips in the case and labels of the cheese in order to prove they're genuine. I don't know about 2 billion or 2 million.
It reminds me of the Great Maple.
They brought that up.
The Great Maple
They
syrup
brought that
heist.
up in the Nutella heist in the If you're curious, real Parmigiano Reggiano is made out of only 3 items to be authentic. It is made out of milk that must be less than 24 hours old, salt, and a calf intestine enzyme called rennet. If you're eyeballing Parmesan on the shelves, look for any additional add-ins. Only those 3 ingredients are authentic. Fake Parmesans have products like cellulose, potassium sorbate, and cheese cultures. The genuine shit does not. Also, I think that if you're vegetarian, you should probably know that there's enzymes used from calf intestines in Parmigiano Reggiano. That's that rennet stuff. Because that's Parmesan isn't the only cheese under attack. Not by far. In November 2015, a warehouse in, I don't know how to say it, Goulagier in eastern France was ripped off of $43,000 worth of Comté cheese.
Ooh.
This is another hard-aged cheese with plenty of value to restaurants and food connoisseurs, selling for $43 per pound in US dollars. These thieves cut their way through a barbed wire fence, crowbarred their way into the warehouse, and absconded with the fromage that's apparently super popular, even though I've never heard of it.
I have.
Well, there you go. It's not just European cheese being stolen. If you had to guess where in America massive cheese heists would be occurring, where would you guess?
Wisconsin?
You bet.
Got it in one.
Less than a week apart in January 2016, there were 2 massive cheese heists. The first one occurred in Marshfield with $90,000 worth of Parmesan disappearing. Then Parmesan, by the way, I don't, that may not have been like authentic Parmesan, but I can't
It wasn't
tell you.
Parmigiano Reggiano.
They did state that in America it's just called Parmesan.
Yes.
Then less classy thieves made off with an entire trailer full of $70,000 worth of multiple cheeses, but primarily cheddar in Germantown. Police did...
If I was going to steal cheese, I would steal cheddar. It's your workhorse. Brie. It's your workhorse of cheeses.
I love brie.
I do like brie as well.
Police did recover the empty trailer and later the stolen cheese from the first heist and the cheese stolen in Germantown, which was found in Milwaukee. So this cheese was recovered. They weren't aware of the black market call for cheese, the thieves. Except for cheese, queso, fromage, whatever you want to call it. So they tried to hawk it at a super low price to local stores, and the stores knew it was worth more than that, and that's how... Yeah, and so they got busted. A local cheese fan, Tyson Vermeister, the co-owner of Mars Cheese Castle, which does in fact look like a castle, the building, was quoted as saying, "We lost all this cheese for somebody who's a complete imbecile." His whole interview was funny, and if I lived in Wisconsin, I would totally patronize.
Road trip.
Yep. I assume that even though the cheese was found, it's unsellable now. Oh. They did say if a label is broken, it is, but I'm like, for real though, are you going to resell it when you don't know what the thieves know? Probably not. So a complete loss. So maybe be cautious of eating some cheese in Wisconsin until that's all used up, because it might have been used. We now jump back to March 2015, where $85,000 worth of shredded mozzarella cheese was stolen. Not even the good shit.
Oh.
Tractor trailer carrying it and all. The entire thing was taken in Lakeland, Florida. I could not find that it had been recovered. Cheese has long been the most stolen food on Earth. The British Center for Retail Research declared that 4% of the world's cheese ends up stolen. That's a quote from them. And cheese is considered a high-risk food for retailers, but its popularity ensures that they have to keep taking their chances on stocking cheese. Yep. Let's all raise a tiny wheel of brie in appreciation for cheese, or dribble some goat cheese with honey and dig in. Fuck almonds, they're overrated. My sources, The Guardian, The LA Times, CBS News, Forbes, Mental Floss, Eater.com, Gizmodo, and Time.
One of the best things, since you said that about cheese, best things I ever had, I got a goat cheese in Buena Vista. There's a goat farm, and they make goat cheese. It was a honey goat cheese, and I smeared it on those little mini brownie bites, and then put half a strawberry on the top. That was, and it looks classy, and people are like, "Oh, this is so good." I discovered chev, of course, as it's called, when it's served up that way at the pie bar. Before I was working there, it was one of the snacks that I got a lot, because it was a scoop of the chev, the goat cheese, with like dried berries over it, and then honey drizzled over it, and then neat like uppity crackers with it. I mean, they were tasty, don't get me wrong. Yes. I snacked on those. But it was really good. And I don't even like goat cheese. So I have one in my fridge because I found an herbed, a garlic and chive herbed cream cheese or goat cheese. And so I'm going to do that and put the honey over it and get some crackers. I just don't have the crackers. But they have a bunch of those now. There's lavender. I hate flour taste in food. I am the same way.
But they have that, and I know a lot of people like it. So look that up. But yeah, I just needed to do something lighter after the two heavier stories.
Death and despair and gloom. Let's talk about cheese and bees.
Since we have time, I almost added another one in, and I could have had the time, but since my first one was so long, I was like, do it shorter. There was this whole heist that's actually the first one I went to look up, and it was an insect heist from insect and lizards, apparently, from like a butterfly pavilion type place. And So this dude goes through the news and he's like, there's been a heist and it was ex-employees because I caught them on cameras and they were just disgruntled ex-employees. And it was this whole thing and they were going to go after the employees and stuff. So what do I find updated articles on it? And in point of fact, because this guy was a terrible business person, it wasn't a heist. They had brought in their own animals for him because to have on display while they were employees. Because he was too cheap and he wasn't given the stuff he needed. And he was the idea fairy. So he'd have a great big idea and they'd sink money into this idea and he wouldn't finish it most of the time. We know some of those. And so they straight up came in and they took their own creatures back.
They took their animals back.
It's still a big bone of contention. Nobody had been charged when I was looking through the articles. And the police had interviewed all of them. And they'd also interviewed plenty of ex-employees who were like, he was a problematic dude to work for, and I can tell you for a fact, they brought in their own animals to flush out the museum, basically.
Wow.
They were using their own cars and their own time to drive to do education events. They were trying everything they could to get this place to be profitable in the black, and these were people who were passionate about these types of creatures, and like one of them now teaches entomology online.
Oh, wow.
And stuff like that. So what they wanted to educate people and they wanted to have these classes for people, but they were using their own time and resources and he wasn't always paying them back and he wasn't giving them money. He insisted in the articles, yes, I did. But there's all these ex-employees saying he didn't. And I'm sorry, I've worked for enough people. I know he's lying. So it was a whole thing because it was going to be then these additional insects from the heist, right? Because it wrapped in, but yeah, it was a real big hot mess. But then some people were like, yeah, but I feel like they also took like some of the other animals that maybe weren't theirs too, but nobody could prove anything.
Were they taking them to rescue them?
Maybe. And some of them were like feeder animals, for example, and stuff like that. Now that was probably outright, but they couldn't prove that. And again, no charges had been filed.
That's a bizarre little case.
Yeah, it was. So I sat there and read about it, but then I didn't cover it. But it was interesting to read all that, especially because in the beginning, of course, you're seeing the original articles where they're like, employees commit massive heist and steal animals. And what it was is the director of whatever the animal operations were had been canned because he had been disagreeing publicly with the boss. About not funding things that were needed, about doing things that were problematic, about the animals. At one point, he wouldn't pay for food. So he said, well, go out into the woods and get what they would normally eat. And made them go out and have cuttings of stuff that the animals would eat. We're talking that far out of him not funding necessary things. That's not how any of this works. Right. And these, again, were people who cared about the animals. It would be like being at a zoo and saying, no, I'm not going to give you food for them. Go out and find some homeless, Yeah. So, and yet they stayed because they were passionate about making it a great place and educating people. And anyway, he fired the guy for the public disagreements. And his people had said, if you go, we go. And so they went. And then they took their animals with them that were their pets. Some of them were coming in on their days off to take care of their animals.
That's not a good situation.
So that was a really interesting thing. If anybody wants to just put butterfly heist, and I think it'll bring it up. But that was
It's funny because every once in a while I look under heists, and it's hard to find interesting ones.
I love heist movies though, especially the ones where like ridiculous hijinks ensue, but they're just really not usually like that.
No,
which is annoying. Like I found 12 of the weirdest heists, and I'm reading through it, and I'm like, what's weird?
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand what you're even.
Why is this?
Why was this written? Because you looked them up like I did. Because somebody said, "Hey,
because somebody
do an article on this," and you couldn't find it either.
Because somebody wanted content.
Yeah.
Now I remember I did some along. It's been quite a while. I want to say it was someone who broke into a restaurant and stole food, and the police, in effect,
was it they left a trail of macaroni salad?
Yes,
I found that one while I was looking through too. Yeah, and I remember that you'd done it.
And they were just like, wow, these are some criminal masterminds we were tracking down here.
There was
on the bike path leading away from the restaurant.
There was a humorous piece somebody did on like their blog that I read about, I think one of the cheese heists. And they were like, unlike that crime in such and such place where they left a trail of macaroni salad, there was no evidence left behind. So that was funny. But Yeah, there were things like that. And there are food heists all the time. I mean, it's food. You can sell food. No matter what, somebody needs food. And so it makes sense that those are things that are heisted, but resale on it usually isn't great.
And they're not
There's
always...
liquor ones. There's big wine and alcohol.
Lots of those.
There was like a huge whiskey heist that I came across.
And they just aren't... The stories just aren't that interesting.
No.
You know, it's like we came to the warehouse and nothing was there.
Right. There was a chain cut to get in the door. Okay, great. And nope. Okay, great. Whole story. And that's why they don't get covered.
So over, and I don't know when this is coming out. It'll be a while. Over Labor Day weekend, I treated Lucy to some 80s movies.
Uh-huh.
So we watched, I can't believe I've never watched this with her. We watched Mrs. Doubtfire, which is so, and it's really funny because I remember it differently. Oh. The pacing and when certain things, I thought this was a bigger part of the story. And
that makes sense. I watched it quite a bit. It's like an annual watch really for me. So
we watched that one. And then the next night we watched Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah, we watched all those with the kids for our movie nights.
It was so funny because after we watched Mrs. Doubtfire, I pulled up some Robin Williams stand-up.
Uh-huh.
And the first one we watched was pre-rehab for him. I don't know if you remember that, but he was so fast. So very fast. Yeah. I mean, not like he ever got real slow.
But he was high as hell.
Yes. So then after we watched Beverly Hills Cop, I said, I just wanted to show you, to contrast some of the later Robin Williams stand-ups. We watched that. And Lucy goes, the biggest difference I noticed is that he's not talking so fast and I can understand him now.
Oh.
I went, oh.
I guess I've watched a lot of his stand. I grew up on Mork and Mindy. I watched that with my dad. And so, everything Robin Williams did, I watched, including his drama turns. But like Greatest Dad and stuff like whatever that is. But yeah, I mean, when they said he was on drugs, they went, oh, yeah. Like nobody was shocked by that.
I believe we all went, oh, yeah, I see that.
That's really part of why at times I'm like, shit, I should just do some coke. Like, I wouldn't have chronic fatigue if I just do coke. But no, I haven't done the coke. It is tempting sometimes, though. And being ADHD, I can't just take the whatever that housewives like to take, stealing from their, because it would calm me down more. But no, I loved his stand.
That was a whole storyline.
Desperate Housewives. I know, that's why I avoided it. It actually annoyed me at first hearing about it. And then I remember somebody trying to convince me to watch it, and they were telling me that storyline because it was new. And I was like, that sounds stupid. Why the hell would I want to watch that? And then like years later, I did the same thing with Lost, but years later I watched it, like binge watched it, and I was like, oh shit, like this is entertaining.
I was a Desperate Housewives fan, and I did watch.
I did not watch it till after it was off.
I like to go back now. A couple of the things I like to go back and watch are Designing Women, because I love...
It's on. Oh, shit. It's on somewhere.
Yes. And streaming. I love Dixie Carter, who did have a short story arc on Desperate Housewives.
I just watched something with a young Delta Burke.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was now.
I don't know what she's doing
somebody
now.
Up. It was great.
I like that for her.
What was it?
And she married Gerald McCraney.
I thought they made the
isn't that
cutest
adorable
couple. Because, again, I watched Designing Women and Major Dad.
Major Dad. Oh, my God.
I tried to watch that again, by the way, and it really didn't hold up because he's a bit of a misogynist.
But now I see Gerald McCraney in stuff where he's like a bad guy.
I know. He was on A-Team. I don't like it either because he was Simon and Simon. He was...
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Major Dad and like all that stuff. So then I see him in that and I'm all, what's happening?
Did they meet? Did they meet on the set of Designing Women?
I think so. I think he might have guessed it, but I don't know.
Yeah, he guessed it.
So here's what I started watching. And then we'll go. Scream Queens again. The TV series.
I watched. How many seasons of that are there?
Only like maybe 2. But
I
I just
watched the
found it
first
on
one.
Hulu.
Oh.
And it is equally funny the second time.
I will.
And I might be catching more of the Easter egg. Come on. There's a whole shower scene with Jamie Lee Curtis and the killer coming after her. Her mother having been in the original Psycho. And so she gets in the shower and you see her like doing her thing. And then you go to the killer on the outside and then he jumps in there and she bashes the shit out of him because she is not in the shower. She says, I've watched that movie hundreds of times. And I was like, oh God, yes. It was fabulous. It's so stupid and it's so fantastic. I'm so happy I started watching it again.
I just saw a clip of that the other day on TikTok.
I love it. So second time through so far.
Oh,
awesome.
I will have to check that out. You know what the movie I thought of today, because it's a stupid reason we don't need to go into, but the movie Twins.
Yeah, we watched that with the kids really just a couple months ago.
I thought I should watch that with Lucy.
I thought I heard they were going to make a sequel or something.
I heard that too.
Okay, so I don't know.
That would be interesting.
It was funny. They were funny together.
They really were. And I'm sure because Arnold seems like the kind of person who tries to learn from everybody he comes in contact with. He could have learned a lot from Danny DeVito.
Yeah.
Who I remember seeing.
Well, I think he did more and more comedy after that.
Yes. Ivan Reitman, the producer, was like, I'm going to put Arnold Schwarzenegger in a comedy. And people were like, what?
Oh, yeah.
Kindergarten Cop.
Yeah.
I loved Kindergarten Cop. Oh my God. It's a tumor.
Not a
tumor.
Yeah. I quoted that a lot after my MRI.
Yes. It's not a tumor.
Because that's what they were checking for. And I was like, it's not a tumor.
And everybody who hasn't watched that movie is like, Shin and Amby are having a stroke.
About?
They're having a shared stroke.
It's okay. It's fine. You can believe that if you want. Or you could watch Kindergarten Cop.
You could. It's such a good movie.
Honestly, you can find that clip on YouTube. I'm certain. Okay, now we can go.
Okay. As we
such a hardship to fill the time. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We'll be back next week with something fascinating and probably not cheesy, but you never know. I'm going to see if I can
know what it could inspire.
I'm going to see if I can find me something cheese related.
You could look into the whiskey heist.
I don't really care.
Yeah. No. All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.